Good night from Washington. No one else is talking about Sean Hannity today, but he's here anyway. We're really glad to see him. Hey,
Is
Sean.
there any news? Anything happening? All right, thanks, Tucker. Great show as always. Welcome to Hannity. Tonight, I got to give a special shout out as we start the show to all of you liberals in the media and all across America, everyone out there that may not usually watch, tuning in about some recent news about yours truly that came up today. Well, let not your heart be troubled. In a few minutes, we will address all of the rumors and speculations, and you don't want to miss that at all. Also tonight, yes, the book tour has begun after months of buildup. Fired FBI Director James Comey has finally kicked off his quest to become rich and famous. And just as we predicted, Comey is now trashing all things Trump, engaging in wild speculation, throwing everybody under the bus, and is the most petty human being on earth. And as it turns out, James Comey's, quote, higher loyalty is to James Comey. Now, tonight, we're going to break down some of the most egregious moments from last night's interview. Plus, we'll show you the questions that Clinton sycophant George Stephanopoulos should have asked last night in his softball sit-down interview. This was by far the worst interview I've ever seen. And also tonight, we'll analyze Friday's U.S.-led military strikes in Syria. It's time for Assad to wake up. The weak, ineffective days of doing nothing of Obama are long gone. And we'll have that and so much more in tonight's important breaking news opening monologue. All right, we've got to start tonight with this. Today, for hours and hours, the media has been absolutely apoplectic and hyperventilating over some breaking news that I was listed in court today as a client for longtime Trump attorney Michael Cohen. Take a look what I mean.
He stood up and he said the name Sean Hannity.
How did he say it? Was it like Sean Hannity? Sean Hannity.
Sean Hannity.
Sean Hannity.
Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity.
Sean Hannity.
Sean Hannity.
Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity.
I'm not that vain, but in a few minutes, we will address all the rampant speculation. They couldn't be more wrong in so many ways. But first, we have a lot more important news to cover, including the ongoing situation in Syria tonight. Now, you wouldn't know if you were watching fake news CNN, conspiracy TV, MSNBC today, but on Friday, the U.S. and our allies launched a large-scale aerial attack on multiple targets in Syria. Now, the strike was a success. Imagine this. Why isn't it front-page news everywhere? All 105 missiles hit their intended targets. No reports of civilian fatalities. And I've said many times, this administration's goal, it's not nation building. We don't want that. But with this strike, the president is sending a clear message to the Assad regime. Don't use these evil, insidious weapons. There will be severe consequences. You can't have men, women, and children literally dying on television cameras like this. So disgraceful. Also tonight, disgrace. Former FBI Director James Comey kicked off his much-anticipated book tour last night with none other than Clinton's sycophant, Clinton's spokesperson, turned ABC journalist George Stephanopoulos. Predictably, instead of taking the high road, discussing important topics, well, Comey, he liked getting a little personal and extremely, well, petty. Take a look.
He had impressively coiffed hair that looks to be all his. I confess I stared at it pretty closely, and my reaction was, must take a heck of a lot of time in the morning. His tie was too long, as it always is. He looked slightly orange up close with small white half moons under his eyes, which I assume are from tanning goggles.
Now, Comey is obsessed, let's see, with the size of the president's hands, his tie length, the color of his skin, the color of his eyes, how tall he is. Now, this is a desperate attempt to just sell books and suck up to all his liberal friends in the media and trash someone he clearly hates. These attacks are not surprising. What is shocking is the attack Comey made next, comparing a sitting president of the United States to a mafia crime family, people involved in murder, extortion, racketeering, money laundering, drug dealing. Take a look at this.
I felt this effort to make us all, and maybe this wasn't their intention, but it's the way it felt to me, to make us all amica nostra. We're all part of the messaging. We're all part of the effort. The boss is at the head of the table, and we're going to figure out together how to do this.
How strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Very strange. And I don't do it lightly. And I'm not trying to, by the way, suggest that President Trump is out breaking legs and shaking down shopkeepers. But instead, what I'm talking about is that leadership culture constantly comes back to me when I think about my experience with the Trump administration.
Think about this for a minute. For a former FBI director, one of the highest-ranking law enforcement officials in the country, to compare a sitting president to a member of the mafia is disgusting, and it's also irresponsible. Now, sadly, this salacious, reckless rhetoric didn't end there. Comey also speculated about the untrue, unverified, uncorroborated claims that were made in the Clinton bought and paid for dossier. You know, the rumors, Trump, hookers, Russia, Ritz-Carlton, Moscow, urinating on a bed. Without a shred of evidence, nothing. James Comey tells Stephanopoulos, well, this could possibly be true. Well, maybe Martians were in the room as well. I mean, it's possible, right? Take a look.
Honestly, never thought these words would come out of my mouth, but I don't know whether the current president of the United States was with prostitutes peeing on each other in Moscow in 2013. It's possible, but I don't know.
Now, this is key. He doesn't know. Now, watch this. Comey also answered this question about who paid for that salacious dossier with Russian lies and propaganda. Take a look.
Did you tell him that the Steele dossier had been financed by his political opponents?
No, I didn't even think I used the term Steele dossier. I just talked about additional material.
But did he have a right to know that?
That had been financed by his political opponents? I don't know the answer to that. It wasn't necessary for my goal, which was to alert him that we had this information.
George Stephanopoulos, where's the follow-up? Why didn't you ask Comey to confirm if that dossier was used as the primary piece of information to obtain a FISA warrant on a Trump campaign associate weeks before the election? Why didn't you ask him, did he lie to the FISA court? Did he withhold the sensitive nature that this document was in fact unverified, not corroborated? Why was it ever presented to a FISA court? And did you ever mention it, that Trump's political opponent in an election year paid for this thing, full of Russian lies? Of course, we have an outside foreign entity putting it together, Christopher Steele. Now, George, why didn't you ask Comey to respond to his former deputy, Andrew McCabe, who told the House Intel Committee no surveillance warrant would have been sought were it not for the information in that dossier compiled by former British spy Christopher Steele, and the dossier information was essential in acquiring warrants? And remember, the Grassley-Graham memo, which found out that the bulk of the FISA application consisted of this unverified, uncorroborated, Clinton bought and paid for Russian lies. Now, once again, without any evidence to back up his claims, Comey also entertained the idea that Donald Trump, the sitting U.S. president, had been compromised by Russia. Really? I guess he wouldn't have bombed Syria on Friday night. Take a look.
Do you think the Russians have something on Donald Trump?
I think it's possible. I don't know. These are more words I never thought I'd utter about a president of the United States, but it's possible.
That's stunning. You can't say for certain that the president of the United States is not compromised by the Russians.
Yeah, it is stunning, and I wish I wasn't saying it, but it's the truth. It always struck me and still strikes me as unlikely, and I would have been able to say with high confidence about any other president I dealt with, but I can't. It's possible.
Again, where's the evidence? And by the way, if you don't know if it's true, how does it get presented in a FISA court to get a warrant to spy on an American citizen? You would think, as a former FBI director, how could Comey make such a serious claim about a sitting U.S. president without anything to back it up? And then the cherry on the cake of Comey's irresponsible, unhinged personal tirade against Donald Trump was when he parroted the liberal talking point that Trump is unfit to serve. So there you have it. Sanctimonious Jim Comey casting judgment from his moral high ground, and yet he doesn't even know if the dossier is true, but it was used to obtain a warrant. Now, if you watch this show, you know that Comey may have committed a number of crimes and misdeeds, things that I believe need to be investigated, including leaking classified, privileged information to the press. Watch how Comey tried to explain this away during this love fest last night.
He made a controversial decision to leak his memos to a friend who read them to the New York Times.
The president's tweeted innumerable times calling you a leaker. Well, what's your response to President Trump?
Look, it's true. I mean, I'm the one who testified about it. That's how people know about it. I gave that unclassified memo to my friend and asked him to give it to a reporter. That is entirely appropriate.
All right, once again, George, where's the follow-up? Why not ask Comey to explain how private communications between a sitting president and an FBI director are not confidential, privileged, and classified? Now, of course, this wasn't the first extremely shaky excuse that he had to go completely unchallenged. Remember when Comey helped draft the letter exonerating Hillary Clinton from crimes? That was in May, before she was even interviewed in July, and 17 other key witnesses were interviewed. And by the way, Peter Strzok ran that interview. Listen to this pathetic and lame explanation.
Critics say the fix was in from the start.
President Trump says you were writing the conclusion even before you interviewed Hillary Clinton. That is just wrong.
Anybody who's actually done investigations knows that if you've been investigating something for almost a year and you don't have a general sense of where it's likely to end up, you should be fired.
Wait a minute. How could you possibly know the likely outcome of a criminal investigation without even interviewing the main suspect or the 17 key witnesses? How many investigations start with an exoneration being written before an investigation? James Comey, have you ever heard about 18 USC 793? How many people can store top secret, classified, special access programming information on an unauthorized server and not be charged with a crime and destroy such information? And by the way, how many people do you know that can delete 33,000 subpoenaed emails, acid wash, bleach bit the hard drive, beat the crap out of her Blackberries with hammers, and not get prosecuted for obstruction of justice? Finally, could Comey's special treatment of Hillary Clinton, well, could that be tied to pressure from his own family? Now, we do know this after last night. We know that his entire family apparently attended the Women's March on Washington after his inauguration, and his wife was an avid supporter of Hillary Clinton. Wasn't this the same march where Madonna talked about dreaming of blowing up the White House? Take a look.
January 21st, 2017. One day after President Trump is sworn in, hundreds of thousands of demonstrators take to the streets, among them the wife and daughters of FBI Director James Comey.
I wanted a woman president really badly, and I supported Hillary Clinton. A lot of my friends worked for her, and I was devastated when she lost.
So did Jim Comey want to be the person who locked up Hillary Clinton while his daughters and his wife were actively rooting for her to become the next president? Now, the fired FBI director was quick to cover his back in response to criticisms of how he handled the Clinton inquiry, including one instance where he threw former Attorney General Loretta Lynch absolutely under the bus. Take a look.
Did you think she was doing that to protect Hillary Clinton?
I didn't know. It worried me. It gave me an uncomfortable feeling because the Clinton campaign had been trying to come up with other words to describe it.
And the final straw, Lynch's meeting on an airport tarmac with President Bill Clinton.
I decided I have to step, as much as I like her, I have to step away from her and show the American people the FBI's work separately. I actually thought, as bad as this will be for me personally, this is my obligation to protect the FBI and the Justice Department. Given all that had gone on, the Attorney General of the United States could not credibly announce this result. And if she did, it would do corrosive damage to the institutions of justice.
All right, now, Loretta Lynch, she released a statement claiming that her actions were pursuant to longtime Justice Department policy. Meanwhile, in a clip from last night's interview that was unaired, Comey also took a shot at President Obama for publicly dismissing claims in Clinton's ongoing investigation. And Comey told Stephanopoulos, quote, he's a very smart man and a lawyer, and so it surprised me. He shouldn't have done it. It was inappropriate. Now, despite the immense buildup surrounding the interview and all the alleged explosive new developments this book was supposed to reveal, the mainstream media's reaction was mixed. Because without a doubt, over the next few weeks, many in the media, they're going to treat Comey as the honorable public servant who stood up to the left's most hated figure, that being President Donald Trump. And you're not likely to see any pressing questions about how we let Clinton off the hook. And you're also not likely to see questions about his rampant misconduct or how at least a dozen high-ranking FBI Justice Department officials have been demoted, forced to resign in disgrace, and one fired in the case of Andrew McCabe during the last year of his reign as director. Make no mistake, James Comey's book tour is off to a very predictable start. The media, while they continue to play up his multiple appearances, this nationwide tour for fame and fortune, it is much ado about nothing. But there are serious legal issues at stake here. Joining us now, former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Joe DeGenever, and the author of the bestseller, Trumped Up, How the Criminalization of Political Differences Endangers Democracy. There's some important things. Joe, I want to start with you tonight, not the least of which I think we've got to go to the dossier issue, in large part because when you look at the dossier, what do we see? He's saying to George Stephanopoulos, it's still unverified. And yet Andrew McCabe is on record saying, oh, without the dossier, no warrant. And we also know that the dossier made up the bulk of the application, according to the Grassley-Graham memo. So he's saying they never corroborated it, and they brought that before a FISA court judge in an application. What does that say to you?
This tortured and troubled man who you has destroyed the integrity, the reputation, and the legitimacy of the Federal Bureau of Investigation single-handedly by his outrageous performance last night on ABC. It is inconceivable to me that anyone can now think that he performed a legitimate law enforcement function during the investigation of Hillary Clinton. And it is quite obvious that the dossier was a fake document, that it was absolutely purposely used illegally by senior officials of the FBI and the Department of Justice. Mr. Comey lied repeatedly last night. And regrettably, he lied to the FISA court. He encouraged others to lie to the FISA court. And regrettably, I think Mr. Comey has to be charged with crimes for falsely presenting information to a FISA court and for apparently lying regularly to Congress.
Alan Dershowitz, professor, I know you don't like criminalization of political differences.
No.
By the way, I share that. And it's gotten as worse as it's ever been. But if you're going to go to a FISA court to spy on an opposition party campaign in an election year, and you're going to use unverified, uncorroborated documents that were bought and paid for by one campaign against the other, and a foreign national using Russian sources of all things to get it, is that a crime in Alan Dershowitz's book?
Well, first of all, Sean, I do want to say that I really think that you should have disclosed your relationship with Cohen when you talked about him on this show. You could have said just that you had asked him for advice or whatever, but I think it would have been much, much better had you disclosed that relationship. You were in a difficult situation,
If you understand the nature of it, Professor, I'm going to deal with this later in the show.
No, I understand.
It was minimal. I put out a statement about it.
You should have said that, and that would have been fair to say that it was minimal.
That's
Look,
fine.
you were in a tough position because A, you had to talk about Cohen, and B, you didn't want the fact that you had spoken to him to be revealed. And you had the right, by the way, not to have your identity revealed.
I have the right to privacy.
Right.
I do.
You know, it's a complex situation when you're speaking to millions of people.
Professor, it was such a minor relationship in terms of, and it had to do with real estate and nothing political.
I understand that. As far as Comey is concerned, look, I don't want to charge Comey with crime. I agree with Comey when he said that he doesn't think that Trump should be impeached. We should leave it to the public. We should leave it to the public to decide whether to read his book, whether to be critical of him, and the public can judge. I don't like trying to turn everything into crimes. You can make crimes out of almost anything. If you take any complicated issue,
but Professor, I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Professor, if you went into court and you brought information and you presented it to a judge, and you never verified that information as being true, and it's to get a warrant to spy on an American citizen, you better damn well know whether or not that information is accurate and disclose to the judge that it is a political document and tell exactly who you know paid for it.
I agree with that, and I do agree, too, that he said on television yesterday that even today he doesn't have confidence in it. And yet to seek a warrant based on something that even after months, you don't have confidence in raises serious questions. But as an experienced criminal lawyer, and I think Joe would probably back me up on this, applications for warrants are often pretty sloppy, and they don't always have everything tied down.
Well,
they use gossip and rumors sometimes. It shouldn't happen.
Gossip and rumors
as a civil libertarian, I'm opposed to that.
I agree that the warrant process can sometimes be imperfect, but let me just say this about James Comey and this particular warrant. Let us remember that James Comey's job was to charge people with crimes after he investigated them and recommend that they be prosecuted. What he did in this particular case was knowingly and willfully abuse the criminal process against an American citizen, and he did so purposely to influence a presidential campaign. Now, you know what? I would never have charged Hillary Clinton with anything beyond a misdemeanor in her case. And if they had been smart, what they would have done was negotiated a deal with her. We'll give you a misdemeanor. You don't lose your civil rights. You continue to run for president.
Hey, Joe, wait a minute, though.
Everybody would have understood.
If I deleted 33,000 subpoenaed emails and I acid washed my hard drive and I beat up devices, again, for subpoenaed material, am I going to get a misdemeanor?
My point is very simple. James Comey drove the criminal process against some people like General Flynn and Manafort and took it away from other people like Hillary Clinton. You know what? James Comey's a criminal and he should be charged.
Look, every civil libertarian should be concerned about...
That's not equal justice.
Right. Every civil libertarian should be concerned about selective justice. We have laws that are so broad, and they apply. On a show just before, we were talking about the former governor of Illinois gets 14 years in prison for what people do every single day in state legislatures all over the country. And yet we prosecute him and throw the book at him. We just have to have a single standard of justice for Republicans, for Democrats alike.
That's right. And Mr. Comey needs to have it applied to him.
All right, we have a lot more to get into tonight. Newt Gingrich will join us next. Also, I will react to the media hysteria today about yours truly, and I will give you the truth on that straight ahead.